Welcome to the Stories of Slavery channel. The story we bring you today is about Silas Bennett, an enslaved boy in 1877 who rescued the plantation mistress from a charging wild bull. What followed next shocked everyone who saw it. This is a tense and emotional narrative, so pause for a moment, take a breath, and listen closely. Before we start, be sure to subscribe to the channel and drop a comment telling us which city and country you're listening from. Your participation helps ensure these stories are remembered, not buried. Let's begin. When they dragged him to the auction block for the second time in his life, the blood was still warm on his back. Silas Bennett was 16, and he had just absorbed the cruelest lesson the American South had to offer. Saving a white woman's life could be considered a worse crime than letting her die. This is the story of a boy who communicated with animals more easily than with people, who committed the unforgivable sin of heroism in 1877 Georgia, and who transformed from the gentlest soul on the Callahan plantation into something the night itself learned to dread. Georgia, 1877, the year the North abandoned the South. Federal troops had withdrawn 3 months earlier, ending what historians called Reconstruction and what white Southerners called occupation. In Washington, politicians shook hands over a compromise that left 4 million freed people at the mercy of their former masters. Rutherford Hayes took the presidency, and the South reclaimed its old ways. For people like Silas Bennett, freedom was a word that only existed on paper, yellowing in some distant courthouse. His father, Moses Bennett, had signed what the white landowners called a sharecropping contract in 1868. Moses couldn't read the document he marked with an X, but the white man holding the pen assured him it was fair. The contract bound the Bennett family to work Henry Callahan's land until they paid off their portion of seed, tools, and the shack they lived in. The debt never shrank, it only grew. Every harvest, Moses would stand in the plantation office while Callahan's overseer, a narrow-faced man named Garrett, ran his finger down a ledger and announced the family owed more than they'd earned. The price of seed had gone up. The quality of cotton had gone down. There were fees for the mule, fees for the plow, fees for living on land once worked by people who weren't paid at all. Silas had been born into slavery in 1861. Too young to recall the war, but old enough to realize the chains on his family were now made of paper instead of iron. They cut just as deep. The Callahan plantation sat in the red clay hills of central Georgia. 3,000 acres of cotton fields, timber stands, and pasture. The main house was a white, columned structure that had survived Sherman's march by sheer geography, standing proudly on a rise that overlooked the worker quarters below. 73 families lived on Callahan land in 1877. All of them black, all of them bound by contracts they couldn't read and debts they couldn't pay. But Silas Bennett didn't spend his days in the cotton fields. He possessed a gift that even Henry Callahan couldn't overlook. The boy could speak to animals. Not literally, of course. Silas didn't hear voices or receive messages from the spirit world, despite what some of the older workers whispered when they saw him calm a wild-eyed stallion with nothing but his hands and his voice. What Silas had was something rarer than magic, something that couldn't be taught or bought or bred into a person. It was pure empathy, an ability to read an animal's fear in the tension of its muscles, its rage in the flare of its nostrils, its pain in the way it held its weight. He moved among horses, cattle, and dogs like he was one of them, speaking their language of breath and posture and careful stillness. When Silas was 11, Garrett had brought a new stallion to the plantation, a magnificent black Tennessee Walker that Callahan had purchased at auction in Atlanta for $200. The horse was beautiful and completely unmanageable. It had kicked 2 experienced handlers and bitten a third. Garrett was preparing to have the animal gelded and broken using the traditional methods employed throughout the South: rope, whip, and the systematic crushing of its spirit until nothing remained but obedience born of terror. Silas had been mucking stalls when he heard the commotion in the paddock. He climbed the fence and watched the stallion rear and scream, its eyes rolling white with terror. 3 men with ropes were trying to corner it against the back wall. The horse's fear was so thick Silas could almost taste it, metallic and sharp, like blood in his mouth. He climbed into the paddock before he'd even thought about what he was doing, moving on pure instinct. The men shouted at him to get out, their voices harsh with anger and alarm. But Silas ignored them completely. He walked toward the stallion with empty hands and downcast eyes, making himself small, making himself safe, making himself into something that posed no threat. He didn't approach directly, but at an angle, giving the horse space to move, space to choose, space to understand that flight was still an option. When he got within 10 feet, he started humming, a low, tuneless sound that came from deep in his chest, a vibration more than a melody. The stallion's ears swiveled toward him like compass needles finding north. Silas stopped moving and kept humming, letting the sound fill the space between them. He didn't look at the horse's eyes, knowing with the certainty of long experience that direct eye contact meant challenge in the animal world, meant threat, meant the possibility of violence. Instead, he watched its feet, its breathing, the gradual softening of the muscles in its neck as the terror began to drain away degree by degree. 5 minutes passed in absolute silence, except for that low humming. Then 10. The other men stood frozen against the fence, barely breathing, afraid to move and break whatever spell the boy was casting. The stallion took a step toward Silas, then another, its nostrils flaring as it caught his scent and found nothing there to fear. 15 minutes later, Silas had his hand on the horse's neck and was breathing in rhythm with the animal, their lungs rising and falling together like dancers moving to music only they could hear. The men with ropes stood watching, their mouths hanging open in